What's up, everybody? Tone here from Reverb. Today we're going to talk about 10 types of synthesis. This is by no means a definitive list of all the types of synthesis. There are arguably more or less, but we're going to get into these 10. And our weapon of choice today will be the Arturia MicroFreak. A lot going on in this small package. It's going to help us with a lot of these, and we also have a custom-built skiff for this video to handle the other ones. So let's get right into it. Subtractive synthesis. This is the most popular type of synthesis, the one that you're probably familiar with, where we take different waveforms with different types of rich harmonic content, and we can subtract what we want from it in order to sculpt the sound we're looking for. So we can take a square wave with a lot of rich harmonic content and then use a cutoff filter to sweep some of that away. After the filter, in most signal paths on subtractive synths, is the amplifier, which is controlled by an envelope. And basically what this does is control the volume or the level of the sound over time. Your first stage, attack, determines how fast from the key press that the sound takes to reach full volume. So a very short attack will immediately come all the way on to full volume, but a longer attack will slope up to that sound and can be used for like more pad style sounds. Stage 2 is the decay. A decay will determine the time it takes to bring that to where the sustain level is. Sustain is not actually a time measurement, it's a level measurement, so when you're holding the key, sustain determines what level the sound will be at as you hold the key. The fourth stage on an ADSR envelope is the release. On the MicroFreak, it's tied to the decay parameter as well, so as you change the decay, you're also changing the release, and the release determines how long the sound takes to reach 0 after key release. So far we've been using the envelope and only applying it to the amplifier, which controls the level of the sound. You can also apply it to the filter that we talked about earlier. And that happens so often that Arturia has included the filter amount knob here. That'll take that envelope and apply the same logic of change over time to the filter. Oscillator, filter, amplifier, these are the 3 basic pillars of subtractive synthesis, and from there, in order to keep your sound dynamic, you can use modulators in order to change your sound over time. You probably also heard about LFOs, or low frequency oscillators. These oscillators are used at sub-audio frequencies in order to basically turn a knob for you. That's called modulation. A lot of synthesizers that use subtractive synthesis have a signal path that's hardwired in that really doesn't allow for you to patch internally. With the MicroFreak, however, there's what we call the mod matrix. And the mod matrix allows you to use different modulators like LFOs and envelopes to patch them in and control other parameters on the synthesizer. We're gonna go over here to the mod matrix and use an LFO to modulate the pitch. FM synthesis uses digital oscillators to produce what are called operators. Operators can be carriers, audible waveforms, or modulators used to modulate the carriers. These carriers and modulators are then arranged in what are called algorithms, and the algorithms can dictate the harmonic content that comes out of these relationships. If this sounds really complicated, it's because it is. DX7 and all those early FM synths were preset-based because people found them too difficult to program like subtractive synths. The MicroFreak has a basic 2-operator FM synth engine. If you've ever messed with the DX7 or other preset FM synthesizers, it's a lot of menu diving in order to get to the controls, in order to control the parameters. What's nice about the MicroFreak is all those controls are right here with dedicated knobs on your panel, so you can mess around and really get experimental with your sounds. get into sample-based synthesis now. This type of synthesis uses pre-recorded audio files known as samples and allows users to digitally process them and chop them up and apply filters and loop them in order to get the sounds that they're looking for. Technology being what it is today, we find most samplers in digital workspaces or DAWs, but today we have the Electron Digitact, which is both a drum machine and a sampler, and we're going to be controlling it with the MIDI out functions from the MicroFreak. So we can take our sample and then mess around with the start point and maybe the loop point to find our playable sound that we're looking for. So we've taken a couple built-in drum samples from the Digitact, and we've arranged them into a pattern, and then we've also sampled from a Curtis Mayfield record to get our sample that we're going to use. And that's just being triggered by the MIDI out from the MicroFreak, and then we can play it on the keyboard. Next up, we're going to talk about wavetable synthesis. This type of synthesis takes two distinct waveforms and places them on a line, and then the user can move between those two with a very smooth interpolation. So you can find all the very unique, distinct qualities of blending those two waveforms and as it changes from one to another. The MicroFreak's wavetable engine has 16 different wavetables and allows the user to modulate the position using LFOs or envelopes or cycling envelopes. So really that motion can be non-stop and you find different sounds and it's always changing. So next up we have vector synthesis. This was invented by sequential circuits and popularized by Korg and Yamaha in the early 90s. This form of synthesis takes 4 different distinct waveforms and then gives you a joystick to kind of crossfade between them. Kind of like wavetable synthesis, except there's no interpolation. You're just kind of changing levels of sound here. The MicroFreak unfortunately does not come with a joystick in its tiny package, but we can use its CV outs to control a custom skiff that we have here, and with a little help from the planar from IntelliGel, we're gonna go ahead and try to crossfade and give a little taste of what vector synthesis sounds like. Next up is additive synthesis. This type of synthesis takes one root note and stacks a bunch of harmonically related content on top of it, so they're all very simple waveforms combined together. You can choose what you want to emphasize or de-emphasize, and that's basically how you sculpt your sound with additive synthesis. This might sound complicated, but if you've ever played an organ, it's just like that. You add stops of harmonically related content in order to build up the character of your sound. Let's go to the Harmo engine on the MicroFreak to find out what additive synthesis sounds like. Okay, on to spectral synthesis. This one's kind of a weird one, but what you do is you take an incoming sound and it's arranged into spectral bends, and kind of like a combination of additive and subtractive, you can have targeted spectral bends that you emphasize and then de-emphasize and shape the sound you want from a sound that you had in the beginning. So the MicroFreak doesn't have its own spectral synthesizer engine, but it does have a lot of harmonically rich sounds that we can then put into our custom skiff that we put together. And with the help of 4MS's Spectral multiband resonator, we can try to arrange the sounds into these bins, these 6 bins here, and maybe, get a feel for what spectral synthesis sounds like. Physical modeling. This type of synthesis uses digital signal processing, or DSP, in order to recreate sounds that you would actually hear in the real world. A good example would be a bow on a violin or a mallet on a drum head. 3 parameters are used in this emulation, one being the exciter, which is the bow or the mallet, the second being the resonant body, which would be the drum or the string, and the third is the position at which the exciter excites the resonant body. By defining these characteristics, the user can achieve realistic sounds of physical instruments like woodwinds and drums and stringed instruments. The Carplus Strong engine in the MicroFreak uses this technology. Let's give it a listen. Time to get real granular now. We're going to talk about granular synthesis. This is where we take a sample of sound and we break it down into its very tiniest of components known as grains. And these microscopic grains can then be looped and changed in size, and you can target different positions within the sample and move around these grains and then play them to create entirely new sounds. So the MicroFreak doesn't have a granular synthesis engine, so we're going to use the custom skiff that we built with the SoundHack Morphogene from Make Noise in order to kind of get that sound and control it with the MicroFreak. Okay, so I've taken this sample, the small sample of Mozart, and we're going to break it down into its grains and try to play some of these strings or the raw material that makes up the sounds in this sample. Okay, so earlier we talked about subtractive synthesis and what Robert Moog was doing over on the East Coast. Now we're going to move over to the West Coast and talk about what Don Buchla was doing with West Coast style synthesis. It's not really a type of synthesis itself, but it actually is just a style. One of the ways Don Buchla achieved this sound was to take simple waveforms and then, with a technique called wave folding, fold the waves back onto themselves, creating rich harmonics and timbres. Then he would sculpt those waveforms and those timbres with low-pass gates. Now, the MicroFreak is by no means a West Coast style synth, but what it does have is a great wave folder, and that can give us a taste of what West Coast synthesis kind of sounds like. Okay, so we covered 10 different types of synthesis today. We didn't do a very deep dive into any of them, but we just wanted to show you what was out there and maybe pique your interest into some of them. If you did enjoy the things you heard today, check out the Arturia MicroFreak. It's a little package with a lot built in. I really enjoyed playing with it. If you have anything to say about the video, leave it in the comments below. I'm Tone with Reverb. Thanks for watching.